I'll introduce it, and then we have our project manager who's going to present it to you guys. So my name's Kim Spurl. I serve as the city zoning administrator in the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits. And the case before you today is ZAC 2023-14. And this is another amendment to the city zoning ordinance that will include revisions to the area and dimensional requirements, additions to building standards in mixed-use districts, and the creation of a new zoning district that we have called urban neighborhood. So Jess Mays is a senior planner in our department who has served as project manager for this amendment. So she's gonna make the presentation to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jess Mays, and I serve as a senior planner in the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits. And then, like Ms. Sproul said, I am the project manager for these mixed-use district amendments. So today, what we're going to go over is the creation of our new zoning district, urban neighborhood. We'll look at the area and dimensional regulations for lots. We'll look at the design standards that we've added, and then we'll finish with the updates to the permitted uses table. So our mixed-use amendments have been a collaborative effort between the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits and BDOT in community development. And together we have established these goals for these amendments. The first goal is going to be to consolidate the zoning ordinance because we are currently working out of two ordinances. So you'll notice the R's, the B's, and the M's, they will be going away and they will become the D's, the C's, and the I's. We also want to increase density in the city, and when we say density, we are specifically focusing on 2 to 12 units, nothing larger than that. We also want to promote housing choice in the city because most of our housing is either single family or large multifamily, so we would like to see more options for that in between. And then we want to create more walkable neighborhoods. There's the concept of the 5 to 15 minute city, and urban neighborhood would be that, where you can walk out your front door and you can be at a little cafe or a bookstore or a bakery within a 5 to 10 minute walk.
How about a grocery store?
Yes, an urban grocery store would be allowed.
We need one.
So urban neighborhood is designed to be compact, walkable, and contain a variety of residential housing options and certain neighborhood serving public uses within a quarter mile of transit. We are limiting the neighborhood serving public uses to urban groceries, small restaurants, bakeries, small retail, and those would be limited to 1,500 square feet, which is the size of a traditional single-family home. They'd also be limited to 35 feet in height, which is our height requirement for D3, our single-family district. So they'll very much match the scale of the existing homes around them. Buildings will be oriented to the street with easy pedestrian access, and then with our new design standards that we're proposing, that's going to help create viable streetscapes that are attractive. And parking will be located in the rear, to the side, or in parking structures that serve multiple lots, so that a giant parking lot is not the first thing you see. All of our buildings will be oriented to the street. And then those housing options that are going to be allowed in urban neighborhood will be small lot, single family, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, multiplexes, and cottage developments. So we have worked closely with BDOT to target sustainable ridership numbers for the BRT, and together we have determined that the BRT system needs a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre within a quarter mile of each station to be sustainable. When you look at our D3 single-family dwelling district, the most single-family homes that you could get on 1 acre is going to be 7 homes. So that is less than half of what the BRT needs to be able to sustain itself. But if you crunch the numbers in the urban neighborhood zoning district, then you would end up with 58 units of housing.
Per acre?
So that's an additional 51 units compared to D3, which is a little over 3 times what the BRT needs to survive. And this is an example of that quarter-mile buffer. This is the BRT station in Woodlawn. It's that green dot in the center. And you can see around that BRT station, the red is B2 general business. And then you see all of that yellow, which is R3 single family. So there's no way that in that R3 single family, you're going to be able to achieve those ridership numbers that you need. That red B2 would allow for multifamily, but in this Woodlawn spine, multifamily apartments are not necessarily the aesthetic that we want to promote. So for this area, we would like to see this spine become mixed-use medium that would fit the character of that area, and then urban neighborhood would surround that main spine and act as a buffer between the mixed use and those single-family neighborhoods. And that would achieve the density that we need. Okay, so why does zoning matter? We know that zoning is important. It tells you what you can and can't do with your property. And with exclusive single-family zoning, that means that those neighborhoods have less walkability and higher cost per unit. Exclusive single-family also doesn't provide the density or economic growth that we need for the BRT. And single-family neighborhoods tend to be designed around cars and not people. And allowing a mix of housing types to be built promotes housing choice for different family dynamics and lifestyles. So this is an example of what single-family lots look like in Birmingham. In single-family, you need at least a 6,000 square foot lot. So that means that we're looking at 12,000 square feet of land that has 2 homes in a D3 single-family district. But if we were to change that to urban neighborhood, we now have 9 structures with 14 units. And you can see that there's still plenty of green space, and it's still a very attractive and viable neighborhood that people are going to want to live in. The American dream is no longer a single-family home with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids. These days, 80% of American households are not traditional nuclear families. We have 28% of people living alone, 25% are couples who don't have children, and 20% are living with roommates. But when we look at our housing options, 72% of American housing does cater to that traditional nuclear family, and only 28% are either multifamily or that small in-between that we're trying to target. So we do need to be able to meet people where they are in Birmingham and be able to provide those housing choices that they need beyond only single family or large multifamily. This is the BRT line, and that's where we would like to target urban neighborhood within a quarter mile of that BRT spine. That star at the top right, that's the Woodlawn station. We would also like to see urban neighborhood in areas with narrow lots where the square footage for traditional single family just isn't available. And then in our historically dense neighborhoods where they are already what we consider an urban neighborhood. We've gotten a lot of questions on what urban neighborhood is going to look like. So these are some housing examples. A lot of the time, urban neighborhood looks like what is already there. We're basically just changing the name of the district. So these are some housing examples of what will be an urban neighborhood, and these are all from the city of Birmingham. That top left is a duplex. That bottom left on the right, that is a 5-unit multiplex, and then next to it is a single-family home. In the middle is a historic multiplex with 8 units. That top right is a duplex. And then that large picture in the bottom is a quadplex with a triplex next to it. So you can see the scale very much matches what single-family homes are going to look like anyway. One of the biggest concerns that we've gotten with urban neighborhood is that large apartments are going to dominate the landscape. So I do want to assure y'all that urban neighborhood is more protective for these historic areas, and this is just an example that we can walk through. This is the Monette Apartments, and they are in Glen Iris. They are a 6-unit apartment building, and they are on a 6,650 square foot lot. So in urban neighborhood, because we require 750 square feet per unit, you would only be able to build out 8 units here. If you did want to build out 9 to 12 units, that would trigger the zoning board of adjustment process, which would allow the neighborhood to have a vote, and that would trigger a regulatory committee meeting where the neighborhood can come out and voice their opinion. Or if you wanted to buy this and build 13 plus units, because we are differentiating between a multiplex, which we're defining as 5 to 12 units, and multifamily, which is 13 or more, if you wanted to do 13 units here, you would have to rezone. So that would trigger the zoning advisory committee process, which is that 3 to 4 month extensive process where they have to come to P&Z. So we do feel like the urban neighborhood is protective for these historic structures, and it actually offers the neighborhood more of a voice in the process.
Yeah, go ahead.
So a little bit of the ordinance, proposed ordinance that I've read. So that structure that you showed, wouldn't be allowed to be built under the proposed code because all of the entrances to the dwelling units are not oriented to the street. They're oriented to the parking lot.
Right, that design would not be allowed.
Yeah, okay.
I mainly wanted to show y'all that that scale is what we're looking at. And if someone were to buy that, you know, we've gotten concerns that, oh, well, they're going to buy this and they're going to turn these 6 units into 40, but they wouldn't be allowed to do that. Not without going through a regulatory process.
Okay.
Can we get rid of the ones we've got?
And then the other big concern that we've gotten is that large commercial retailers would be allowed to come into the neighborhood. So again, we are limiting those limited amount of commercial uses to 1,500 square feet or less, which is the size of a traditional single-family home. We're also limiting the hours of operation, and then for restaurants, we do not allow any outdoor music or bands. And this is Eagles Restaurant. It's in the Asipco Finley neighborhood, and it's just a size and scale reference. It's under 1,500 square feet, and then you can see on the inside that they have enough for 5 tables. So when we say, you know, a restaurant would be allowed to open in an urban neighborhood, it's going to be something very small like this, not like an Applebee's. And now we're going to move on to the changes to the area and dimensional regulations table, and this is going to be on page 16 in your packet. All of the changes that we're proposing are in red, and all of the existing text is in black. So we are reducing the minimum lot area required. We are reducing minimum and added maximum lot widths. There is a 6-foot minimum front setback in urban neighborhood. There's a 0-foot rear setback, and there's a 5-foot setback on both sides. So you could do 3 on one side, 2 on the other.
Did you say page 16?
Yes,
Do
of
you have a
that.
page 16?
I don't know, I'm looking at the PDF and I don't have it numbered that way.
It should be in the Article 3 definitions packet.
The handout that we have starts with page 70. And then back in the back, there's a 16, but it doesn't have.
That might be the permitted with conditions packet.
Oh,
We have a lot of packets with this one.
do you have one of these?
I don't know that I got anything that looks like that, but anyway. Oh, here it is. Okay. But it's not numbered in the PDF. I don't think. Thanks.
Thank you, that helps a lot.
Okay, yes, great. I'm glad y'all found it. Moving on, we're now going to look at those dwelling design standards that we've added, and these are going to start on page 8 of that same packet where the table was. Dwellings will be required to be oriented to the street. Porches or stoops are required at the main entrance, and they may be roofed or screened, but they cannot be fully enclosed. And the front porch, including the steps, can extend into that front yard setback, but it does have to be at least 3 feet from the property line. Windows are going to be required on walls facing streets or common areas, and at least 20% of those windows and wall area of each floor that faces the street, or at least 20% of the wall shall be windows or pedestrian doors. And then flat roofs have to be enclosed by a 42-inch minimum parapet, which is just like an architectural cover. And shed roofs are only allowed in rear yards and must be attached to the primary structure. These are non-dwelling design standards, so these would apply to those limited commercial uses, and they're going to start on page 9 of that same packet. The frontage facade void area, which is just pedestrian doors and windows, has to be equal to 25 to 75% of the total frontage facade. Doors and windows cannot be spaced further than 20 feet apart. Decks are not allowed in the front yard. And then building rooftops have to be designed to effectively screen mechanical equipment from street view. This starts the permitted uses table, which is that spreadsheet packet. These are just our notable changes. We don't have to go through each item line by line. Again, all the changes that we're proposing are in red, so you can easily pick them out. On page 1 of our packet, we have added definitions for each of these. And again, that's that packet that had the table in it. It says Article 3 definitions. But we have added definitions for multiplex, which is the 5 to 12 units. We've added definitions for automobile parking structure, grocery store, and urban grocery. We have removed all auto-dependent uses from mixed-use districts, and we've removed the D6 planned residential zoning district because we found in our internal audit that we just weren't using it, so we have removed it. For our public engagement process, we have done a really robust public engagement. We had 4 stakeholder meetings throughout the month of November with professionals in the field of architecture, planning, and design to get their feedback on the ordinance, and we incorporated their comments into this final draft. We took this to the Citizen Advisory Board on November 20th and received a vote of support. And we've taken this to the Planning Commission. We took it January 10th, February 7th, and March 6th. We did address concerns from the Planning Commission, and on March 6th, we did receive a unanimous vote of support. And we took this to the Zoning Advisory Committee last night to have them ratify the Planning Commission decision, and they did ratify that unanimously to support. We have also met with the Fountain Heights neighborhood leadership and gone over urban neighborhood with them, and they are very supportive and excited. And throughout the Northside Southside framework plan process, we have also discussed urban neighborhood and received words of support at those meetings. So our next steps for urban neighborhood will be going to City Council. And that concludes our presentation.
Mr. President, do you have any questions?
I have a few. So I'm wondering, it looks like, and I admit that I've gotten through most of this document, but not all of this one. And just based on your presentation, I didn't see an allowance for abutting structures. So, when I think of, traditional dense urban neighborhood, I'm thinking, of a street where all the structures abut one another, and you maybe got like a stoop on the front to access the structure. Um, this is not that. Is that correct?
That may be considered townhomes, which would be allowed in urban neighborhood. And we do have areas in where we want to put urban neighborhood where it is those buildings where they are connected, but on separate lots. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Yes, we do have those, and they would be allowed in urban neighborhood.
But with a 6-foot setback, so they,
From the front.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But they could be attached.
Yes.
Okay. So, also, you said that there was a 0 setback at the back of the lot,
Right.
but in that type of setup, you know, I'm thinking of recently walked around DC and some of the neighborhoods that I'm thinking of, that have this type of design, and all of the vehicular access is from the alley at the rear. So, in that type of design, I would want there to be a sufficient setback requirement so that, the occupants of the dwelling or the operators of, the business, could park at the rear of the structure rather than, curbside in front. So, that's one thing.
Okay.
Okay. And generally, I think, that, encouraging alley access, is a direction that, a lot of us would like to go. It reduces the amount of curb cuts and thus pedestrian and bicyclist, conflicts. So, you know, um,
And I will say, in that really large packet for like automobile parking lots and structures, we do require alley access.
okay. Well, I actually looked, in this document, and like, for example, automated car wash, it says, alley access where possible. So that leaves it, open to interpretation, and that we're actually dealing with one of these cases currently where, the fire department makes the determination, well, we can't fight a fire from the alley at that location. Thus, there has to be a curb cut for this automated car wash, you know. So, what I'm saying is that even though you got the language, in the zoning code, if the fire marshal says, well, the alley doesn't work, then,
And I think, Counselor Quinn, so we're aware of the development you're talking about. And we added the where possible, so that gives us the opportunity to meet with the Department of Transportation to make sure that that alley can sustain the number of vehicles, that it's paved, that it's adequate for access. But we weren't ready to eliminate it completely just because of those fire access issues. But I think once we finish this process, we do plan on meeting with the fire department and with transportation so we can review some of these documents that we all have that we guide our developments so that we can eliminate the issue that you just described. that two departments say it's okay and one doesn't. We want to make sure we're all on the same page when we meet with these future developers and that we have the correct information to give them.
Yeah, and, you know, I would, prefer, you know, that there be some like specific, measurements, and the fire department may, you know, have those, that say, you know, okay, if there's overhead utilities, then, you know, we can't access the property from that point. But even so, you know, a fire truck can drive over a curb pretty easily.
Right.
So, you know, even though there isn't a curb cut at the front of the property, a fire truck should be able to, you know, access the property even without a curb cut, in that particular instance. But you know, so I'm referring to the automated car wash because that's where I recall seeing it. But I'm, you know, actually speaking to across the board, you know, I think we have a shared goal of wanting to reduce the number of curb cuts and really, you know, making the sidewalk, the frontage of the property, accommodating to pedestrian and bicyclists, you know.
Absolutely.
So, we don't need to have the, you know, I'm just gonna say this plainly, we don't need to have the fire department working against us in that cause. So we need them to think outside the box.
Right, we hear you.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to say to your previous question about garage access off of an alley, we do require that they have at least 5 feet if they're entering the garage off of the alley. So the alley won't actually be built to the property line, so folks are turning around in the alley itself. And then the ordinance that was adopted yesterday does require new driveways if the alley is in a usable and good condition, that all residential driveways be accessed off the alley.
great.
Anything
I'll
else?
well, I'll come back.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I wanted to ask about, you know, and the alley issue is a big